We are back and ready to continue the day and get to our semi-final number one. I'm Raven, and joining me is Sottle, and I think we've just been treated to a fantastic weekend of Hearthstone, especially today with this top 8, and this top 4 is just as good as you'd imagine.
Yeah, it's been absolutely great, and these tend to be the case with these tournaments that come so soon after balance changes, after expansions come out, whatever it is that shakes up the meta. If you throw a tournament into mix within about a week or so of that happening, they do tend to be the most interesting ones, and they do quite often tend to be the ones where, the players with the pedigree are the ones that are left standing at the end as well. It does seem to favor people in that situation, and just based off purely anecdotal evidence, here we are again with a stacked top 8 of very well-known players who have taken advantage of perhaps their superior deck building skills and their superior connections to other top players that they can form practice groups with and really put the hours in and get in those juicy deck lists. And that is what we're down to here with just 4 players remaining. All of them are incredibly storied players within the Masters Tour system or within Grandmasters in most cases.
Yep, and the 2 players we are going to be covering now in this first semi-final is Alutemu versus Thijs. And exciting for many reasons for me, Sottle. Not only am I just fans of both these players, but it's always nice to see the GMs from different regions clash now and again across these Masters tours. Also, it's cool that it's in top 4, but just in general, just to have the regions just see, test their strength, so to speak. And it is cool to see this matchup, as I do rate Alutemu very, very highly, and maybe I would put him in the top 2 players in the Asia Pacific region, in Grandmasters at least.
Wow, who is the other one, Raven? I can't possibly imagine who else you, of all people in the Asia-Pacific region, think is one of the top players.
Well, I think the fact I'm putting him maybe next to Surrender shows how much I respect Alutemu as a player. And I think, although maybe he didn't look his best earlier in the day, in his first match, hopefully he's just, spent the time between these matches just tightening up and maybe just getting ready for this one. And he's going to show us something a little bit stronger, because we all know he is good enough.
Yeah, he did look really shaky. And by that, I mean, I don't necessarily think all of his plays were bad. I'm not even really talking about his play. Just him as a person in his camera looked really confused and unsure the entire time he's playing, which is in stark contrast to what I'm used to seeing when, we usually catch second half of Asia Pacific broadcast while we're getting ready to go live for Grandmasters. So we see a fair amount of him, and it's just not usually the case. He looks cool, calm, and collected most of the time, but did seem very unsure of himself in his quarterfinal, but was good enough still to get the job done and find himself here in that semi-final. And if there was any nagging doubts in his mind, he's got to put those behind him now, because he's up against the might of the multi-time European champion in Thijs, one of the most storied players in Hearthstone history, Hall of Famer, first ballot, free. Thijs, absolutely one of the game's greats at this point.
Yeah, and it just continuing to impress. I think the only time I'll stop being impressed with his Hearthstone play is when he stops playing Hearthstone, if ever. Because every time you think, oh, Thijs is a bit quiet, he's not done anything too crazy, apart from being one of the most successful streamers in Hearthstone. And he's just back-to-back to top 8 in 2 Masters Tours. It's crazy. He's still just got it. When he wants to compete in a tournament like this, he shows up and gets the job done. And that is extremely impressive, because it's not like he took loads of time off streaming or anything, right? Like, he's still cranking out tons of hours a day streaming whilst still being good enough to make it into this top cut in a very, very stacked tournament like all these Masters Tours are. So my respect for Thijs, even though I've known him a long time now, just continues to grow day by day. It's crazy.
Yeah, I made the point, I believe, on day one that, people do have this kind of dismissive attitude towards streamers. It's like, oh, they just stream all day, they're not really competitive players anymore. But when you think about what that means, it means that they wake up and play 8 to 10 hours of Hearthstone every single day. And if you're an extremely talented player like Thijs is, that's going to keep at least your mechanical skills incredibly sharp. And maybe if you're out of touch with the competitive meta, you might fall behind in deck building, lineup construction, super deep matchup knowledge, that kind of thing. But that's where a practice group can come in, which Thijs certainly does have with the other G2 players and people that join that group occasionally. Casey, I know, has practiced with them on multiple occasions. So, you have people like that to fill in gaps for you, and Thijs obviously can pick up stuff that he doesn't know incredibly quickly, even in situations like that. So it all comes together to be a winning formula, as you were saying. Whenever Thijs shows up for a tournament, he means business.
Right, and let's get into the game, as both these players are now ready. And Sottle, I need your answer. Where are you? Which side of the fence are you sitting on here for this Warlock versus Hunter as it stands today?
Yeah, I had this conversation with Derek. I actually haven't put any testing into this matchup since the nerf. Obviously, Dragon Queen Alexstrasza, I do think does make a difference in the matchup. But I did say that we had this argument quite extended during European Grandmasters, where I was saying that, you know, Quest Warlock did absolutely fine. And you were saying, no, it's Hunter favored. And then, you know, the testing that we put in back then did show a slight edge to the Hunter when we actually, you know, put it to the sword and tested the numbers. But I don't know if, you know, a nerf to Dragon Queen Alexstrasza is enough to tip the balance in this one.
Well, it was enough for Thijs to not include it in his list, as he is one of the players who has chosen to cut it. Still running the Nag Grand Slam, which is where I'd be very upset. You know how I feel about Nag Grand Slam, but if you cut in Alex and not playing Nag Grand Slam, I think you've got some questions that need to be asked at that point. So, still playing that, and still has the usual flurry of 1 and 2 drops and 3 drops, of course, in this Hunter list. So, I think the cut is fine overall. I've still not had enough time myself to decide whether I'm a fan of it or not in Hunter specifically, as I think the Alex nerf is still quite undecided on the actual level of impact it's going to have.
Yeah, I will say that the Frizz build has impressed me this weekend, though. Just in this tournament, seeing what Frizz has done, it's something that I will certainly be trying out and see if it does stand the test of time. But up until this point, it's looked pretty powerful in the games that we've seen from the Hunters in this Masters Tour.
Yeah, and speaking of pretty powerful, Alutemu gets a pretty solid clear this early in the game, actually. That was starting to look a little bit dicey with just a decent board from Thijs, but the Moarg Rain of Fire going to clean that up. Thijs gets to respond with a Mana Saber, but Alutemu still has plenty of gas left. He has now the Dark Skies, but also this Sense Demons is just... it's a card I'm never really too upset with having in my hand at any point in the game as the Warlock.
Yeah, especially in particular matchups where you kind of need that healing on demand effect. Of course, one Moarg now already drawn and played, which means that Sense Demons is getting more likely to pick up both upside down brood mothers, as they might end up being based on how the spectator feed has been going this weekend. But still, that's a huge amount of burst healing. And with one Moarg used, that's one Moarg that you can't use for burst healing with the Nether Breath. Therefore, the Sense Demons pulling out the brood mothers is something that you might have to rely on a little bit more. He's just going to rip it now just for straight up card draw, though. Mana efficiency and card draw right here.
Yeah, and I think the fact that Dark Skies is in hand is a nod to that as well, because it means that it's obviously making the hand size bigger to make Dark Skies stronger going forward. And speaking of healing, there is this ever-present card defender in Alutemu's list, and some of the other Japanese players as well, seemingly to favour Karta.
Yeah, breaking it down a little bit, I do like this decision, because I'm just looking at options that Thijs would have for development this turn. Alutemu set it up so he's drawing cards and he's still securing himself a 9 damage Dark Skies if he needs it, which should be good enough to deal with any board state that gets generated, and lo and behold, there it is, 9 health on board. He's going to go up to 8 cards here off the natural draw, and then 9 tap for the Dark Skies. So yeah, really well-engineered set of turns from Alutemu.
Very clean, and this is what you don't want to see if you're the Hunter player. You don't want clean removal on demand. We saw the Moarg Rain of Fire earlier. Now that Dark Skies, we can see that Plot Twist is available as well as a Kartut defender. So Alutemu can pick and choose what he wants to run with going forward. This Dragonbane might be everything that Thijs has, actually, to try and win this game shortly.
Yeah, it's starting to look that way. And crucially, before all of those minions start coming into play, this is one last threat check from Thijs' side. Alutemu needs to have one more key piece of removal before he can really feel like he's out the woods. And he absolutely does have it with the Moarg Nether Breath or the Nether Breath Coil, depending on how much he feels like he wants to secure this healing.
Yeah, I like the Moarg. I think, and this might sound strange, but because he has access to more healing, I like him using more healing. And that sounds very stupid, but my point being that there's no reason to give any opening that might give Thijs time to win the game, just out of nowhere, right? I think it's because he has such an abundance of it in this list. Just be pretty loose with it. Like, just make sure you just don't die, because as this game's continuing, Alutemu is just going to get progressively more favoured to win.
Yeah, I actually do completely take your point, because, for example, live in the world where you didn't take the max healing that turn, you left a free board for your opponent, they jam Dinotema Bran on curve, smash you for 8, and then you're trying to respond with Cartoot defenders, but potentially you can get killed over the top then with like Corrosive Breath, Kill Command, whatever else, Zephyrus for lethal, so yeah, totally agree.
Really nice coil as well on this Griffin. And now, on 18 here, where do you lie with the plot twist versus a safe Carter, I'll say?
Cartoot does look fairly appealing, I will say. What's the quest on right now? 30?
Oh, I'm not 100%.
Of course that's the right way.
Just because I know you're a fan of really going for the card drawing Warlock. I think I've heard you say before where you feel like players just don't draw enough cards, don't go for the quest activation, even though it's kind of the point of the deck.
Yeah, no, and with the only reason I was kind of stalling is I wasn't entirely sure what the quest completion was on, but then after you drew the card, went up to 14, I think, yeah, this is just so easily done this turn, where you play the questing, you play the plot twist, the quest gets finished, and then life tap draws you your first 0-cost card, and absolutely like last game, Alutemu is just nutting these 0-cost draws. That is absurd.
The best 0-cost life tap player I have ever seen. It is he only taps into the perfect cards.
He absolutely does, and this time he decides he does want his 0-mana 8/8 after he draws it. Slightly different version of Alexstrasza in this occasion, but he just jams it to Thijs' face, and Thijs is now instantly on the defensive. Does have the answer with the Zephyrus though, but it means that this Zephyrus is going to have to be used defensively and for very little tempo here if it is going to be used. But Thijs does have options. He can instead go with the Faceless Corruptor and preserve the Zephyrus if he wants to.
Yeah, he still gets to clear the board with that as well, because he can weave in a Zigzag and go for a swing. So I actually do like that overall, because I agree. I think, especially because of Thijs' hand, we might even be looking at like Zephyrus Tyrion as a play here, because he's got nothing else. There's no Alexstrasza in the deck. It relies on anything else would rely on him drawing exactly Nagran Slam or Siamat or Bran, but he's got 17 cards left. I only named 3. You know, it's still looking rough.
Agreed. All right. No more giga high rolls for Alutemu, at least at this point. It's gonna be Zephyrus. Yeah. Oh, it's active. Oh my goodness, it's active.
Don't you ever question Alutemu's taps ever again, Sol, because he will just prove you wrong time and time again. Literally the best taps.
So over the course of, 2 Quest Warlock games in top 8, he's tapped into Dragon Queen, Alexstrasza, Malagos, Zephyrus twice.
Yeah, and the first Zephyrus was the actor, or very close to his activation. He got his thing activated, then tapped into the Zephyrus in the first game.
Insane. Deck's almost impossible to beat when this kind of stuff happens, and it's it's a sign of a good deck, right? I was saying this again the other day, where most good Hearthstone decks have these built-in success rates that your opponent can't really interact with. You have that percentage of wins just under your belt, and you just have to scrap for the rest of the games, and Quest Warlock is no different.
And Thijs here struggling to even deal with a 5/5 without losing too much. He's sat on 10 health. A lot of the time you die from 10 without shenanigans from this Warlock, honestly. Zephyrus Coil. Has there been a lower impact Zephyrus played today? Probably not.
The one that was played to go fishing for the Soul Cleave but didn't offer it and then just ended up conceding the game, that was probably lower impact.
Okay, but it was high impact in a comedic value, because that concede was funny.
That's true.
So there is lethal for Alutemu here, right? He can just go Soulfire and then Zephyrus Fireball. But there's a chance he throws. The Soulfire discards the Zephyrus, which means he just have to just consider what he needs to do here. The Crazed Netherwing would put Thijs down to 7, which again doesn't give it that sort of fireball range. So I think he just has to go for it. Nothing too crazy here. Does get the Zephyrus. And that is going to be game number 1, Sol. And Alutemu, I never want to play him if he's playing Quest Warlock. I will just insta-concede. I'm putting that out right now. Insane.
Yeah, there was multiple ways to go about that, but I was silent. Alutemu was taking his time as well. I think just searching for a way that was 100% guaranteed, but there were lots of, just one card discard failure rate ways to do that in the end. But still, in that position, I think it was a good spot to go for it. Sometimes with Quest Warlock, it's not even necessarily correct to go for the lethal when you have a failure rate like that, because you're so far ahead in the game that you don't want to take the 1 in 5, 1 in 6, whatever it might be, to lose in an already won game. In that position, he was so far ahead that even if he whiffed on the immediate lethal, he was probably still winning the game even after that point anyway. So I think totally justified in going for it in that spot. But outside of that, really, really smooth and easy game. He does have to engineer himself into that position through the way he played the early game. When I talk about these decks having their built-in success rates, you still have to know how to pilot the deck at a high level to take advantage of those. And Alutemu's early game sequencing, with the Sense Demons lining up the Dark Skies, making sure he had all the health breakpoints covered from the Hunter, were very, very key at even getting him into that position. And not to mention the choice of just valuing completing Quest over being defensive with the Kartuk Defender that we talked about as well. So even though it's easier to focus on just the nutty life taps at the end there, still a lot of decisions that get you to that point.
Yeah, and whether his shakiness, I'll use that weird word for earlier in the day, was down to general or maybe down to a specific deck or not, I will say he looked pretty confident in that Warlock game. I hope for his sake that is just done, you know what I mean? Like, he just continues regardless of what deck he locks in. I personally had the most questions about Hunter, of his Hunter play, which, perfect, he's going to play now. But I think I'd have the most questions about Hunter anyway, no matter who I'm casting. But we'll see, because there are times when players have comfort decks, right? And players also have decks where they submitted them because they are correct to submit, in their opinion, but they might not just be as comfortable playing the deck, which is reasonable. That's just a human thing, right?
Yep. It's also worth pointing out that we could be entirely reading too much into this, and if you asked Alutemu about it, he might just say, I thought I made the best play every turn, and it's just like I'm reading way too much into what his body language was on camera, but he certainly did look a little bit suspicious to me on camera.
Meanwhile, though, Thijs on his Rogue has a fairly solid opening hand. His choice of 1-drops, even the secret to go with his Blackjack Stunner, can put a bit of a stopper on some Hunter openings as well.
Yeah. I love this from Alutemu, though. Instant decision, just to suck it up, drop the Fairy Dragon, say, okay, fair enough, I'll take the trade. You can trade your 1-drop into my 2-drop, because it's not going to get any better from here if you try and hold back and find a different solution to the problem.
Yeah, we were talking about this. I was talking about this with Lorinda earlier when we were casting Rogue, in that it's almost like a freeze trap, like explosive trap-esque thing, where sometimes people can play around it too heavily, and it makes Spy Miss just even better than it is, because it just makes your opponent not play cards.
Right. It's like, what are you waiting for? Them to reveal it and hit you in the face so you can Desert Spirit? Like, no, that's not going to happen.
On ladder, maybe. At my rank. But maybe not in the Masters Tour. And already
loving this from Thijs, though.
Yeah, this is looking like it could be one of those games, because this might not look like the worst thing to happen, but it kind of is against Hunter, or as the Hunter. You can't really fight back that well without some very, very solid draws. He does have Scale Rider, Stormhammer's good, of course, but he's still got a bit of a way to go here to get a hold of this board.
You fell right into my trap.
Yeah, and the ambush token is going to help him fight back as well. But early Blackjack Stunners, I think, are underrated by some players. We saw it in the previous series with Bunny Hopper, where he just absolutely decimated the Totem Shaman with early Blackjack Stunner. We saw it to our own great amusement, if you remember, in Grandmasters as well, Raven, where Thijs just spent an entire game against Warrior, just Blackjack Stunnering every minion they played for like the first 4 turns with Shadow Steps. It was great.
Yeah, it's so powerful, and we've spoken about this before, but Shadow Step for me just unlocks so much potential in Rogue. Whenever you have it in your hand, you must be feeling in a pretty powerful spot. But here for Alutemu, these are the tough ones, because anything he plays, he knows is going to die. Maybe he just plays Frizz, let that die because it has its effect anyway. And then just hope this improves next turn. He has Rotnest Drake to kill something, but Rotnest Drake, although We talked about how powerful the card is. Against Rogue, when Rogue is winning, it becomes much less so because it is so difficult because they always have lackeys. They always have just little minions dotted around, which means Rotnest isn't just hard sniping, you know, an on-curve 5-drop or 6-drop.
Yeah, certainly we've been seeing on stream a lot of the matchups where Rotnest Drake really does shine. You know, we've been seeing the druids who draw the ramp kind of matchups where you just bust out the one huge minion that they play on curve with the Rotnest Drake, or the games where the Hunter has drawn the early game when they're the slightly faster deck in the matchup against a more mid-rangey, you know, opposing Highlander deck or whatever, and then Rotnest Drake can just come down and just crush out the mid game when they start playing their mid-range minions of their own. But when it's another aggro deck up against you, it can be a little bit difficult to get good value out of Rotnest Drake.
There's a chance now that Alutemu could go for Fairy Dragon, Bone Chewer Brawler, still have that Stormhammer activated, so he'd still get the free swing, but deciding to go for the Rotnest anyway, guaranteed kill on a minion, takes the most power off the board.
Wow. Thijs needs to turn these Shadow Steps into other Hearthstone cards as quickly as possible,
Right.
so let's start stepping this Evil Miscreant. Yep.
And maybe, you know, for our vision, the Evil Miscreant might have been the better target for Rotnest at this point with knowing Thijs' hand.
Yeah, it's possible.
Because Rogue does have the game sometimes where they don't access the big card draw, right? And that's when they can struggle.
Peace and quiet!
I think Thijs still needs more gas here. Didn't hit a Draconic Lackey or Spell Lackey. He's really got a hand that kind of needs some value in this position.
Can't even kill the Rotnest.
He does just set up lethal here, though, technically. It's a fairly soft lethal, but it's a lethal setup nonetheless.
Bone Chewer Brawler, I imagine this Dwarven Sharpshooter actually is going to be clutch here, being able to kill an extra minion once again for Alutemu. The big problem that Alutemu is going to have is it might get close to Thijs being able to just dagger him down. However silly that may sound, because Alutemu's got a lot of ground to make up. He is slowly stabilizing on board, but that's 30 health for Thijs. On his end there. That is a long time for Alutemu to try and get some attacks through, whereas Thijs, like I said, might just be able to just get a dagger or two in. He's lethal here.
Yep. See what this Miscreant brings. He does still get to Shadow Step it the second time, which is the thing I was concerned about in the previous turn, with his hand just so starved of value. If the lethal push didn't immediately pay out, he might have been struggling, but the Miscreant was almost always going to survive in that scenario anyway, so he just banks the second Shadow Step now. And now with Rush Lackey plus Kobold, he can push, what, 4, 5, 6 to face? A little bit off.
And what do you think here then in this situation? Is it a get rid of the taunt, everything go face, try and end the game? Or do you think Thijs is going to try and make some trades work with the help of this Kobold Lackey?
I think you can value trade over the Dwarven Sharpshooter and then make a similar play to what you did last term, which is just put an annoying Titanic Lackey taunt in the way and just ship everything else face and ignore the Rotnest Drake again.
Yeah, kind of a best of both worlds play, I suppose.
Yep. Yeah, exactly this. This looks good to me.
Oh, Thijs is only on 29 though. He has edged slightly closer to death.
Oh, risky stuff. Oh, unleash the hounds.
Not bad.
So you are saying there's a chance, Raven?
And the best part is, I say best part, I wonder if Alutemu is going to play another minion, because he knows it's an ambusher, so he might just skip, right? Clear the board. He can use his weapon.
Weapon on the 1-3, 3 in, 3 in, and he's 1 point off clearing. Okay. So yeah, he doesn't really have enough afterwards to deal with the ambush token as well.
Right.
It's a tough spot to be in.
But he knows Thijs is playing off the top.
Right. So by that, he could deal with it by just sacrificing his Rotnest Drake and just reset the game to the point where he has 4 chunky mid-range minions in hand and Thijs has nothing. Having now committed that attack already, it doesn't look like that's going to happen, though. Ooh.
Wait. Isn't that just...
Right into my
Isn't that just... gay?
Yep.
Oh, well, he's one off, right?
Oh yeah, he double trades
Yeah,
lackeys.
yeah.
Okay, thought there was 2 lackeys left remaining. Yep, fair enough.
I guess Alutemu just saying, well, you know what? If I don't play a big enough minion, the game lasts maybe a turn longer for him to try and catch
Right.
up. That's just another dagger swing for Thijs. So then it just doesn't matter anyway.
So now Thijs just has to look through the deck list and try and figure out what, if anything, stops him just pushing lethal over 2 turns here. I think the answer is just Zephyrus at this point. Mat as well can come down, Divine Shield Taunt. That looks to be about it.
Yep, I'm just doing a quick check.
Oh my goodness!
Just pretend Alutemu live tapped, that's all. Because that's what it's feeling like right about now.
Yeah, that is an Alutemu tap right there.
Could just win the game if he just heals, right?
Is it 11-14? Had to have the cursory look at the lethal going back the other way before we get too excited
Oh,
about
true,
healing.
yeah, true.
Yeah. Radiance? Looks like it's going to be the play.
Do you like Radiance over Healing Touch?
Well, he can't engineer Healing Touch perfectly, right, with the mana breakpoints that he has in his hand.
Yeah, he could have
So I
played
guess
Fairy
it
Dragon.
just... Fairy Dragon, Zeph Healing Touch. Oh, yeah, fair
Yeah,
enough.
because
fair
it's
enough.
3, right?
So I guess in that case, I haven't done this, but I'm going to assume Alutemu has. He's counted his 2-turn clock and decided that he needs this 5-5 in play
Okay.
over the 3-2 to be able to get a reliable 2-turn clock.
Ooh.
I imagine that's what it comes down to.
And kind of good, kind of not good draws for Thijs. This Black Dart Stunner can be activated because he drew the dirty tricks. But from Thijs' point of view, is that even enough? Just gonna have one more draw. That's a whiff.
That's a whiff. So now 6 damage can get sat back off the board, which means there's 5, 10, 13, 16, 18 being shown. Yes, this was exactly the 2-turn lethal setup. It's exactly what Alutemu was going through. Took the risk with the smaller amount of healing off the Radiance to represent the extra minion on board, so he had it covered, even if his largest source of damage got removed.
Yep, and also just an extra note, but the rogue list does not play natural eviscerates as well. So in case you're wondering, you're not too used to some of these rogue lists. It's like, no, there couldn't have been an eviscerate draw for the victory. And Alutemu, whoa, look at that! He knows that was close. Gets the win, 2-0 up versus Thijs. And I don't know if you'll agree, Sol, but I think it's safe to say Alutemu is seeming a lot more stable because he is making plays that are way better than things I'd looked at, even when I thought, for some silly reason I couldn't count, I thought he was just playing into lethal with the Ambusher, the setup with the Radiance over the Healing Touch, even though it feels a bit unnatural to not go for the most healing when you're on 1 health or whatever it was. So I think Alutemu's got his head on straight for this one, 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. Insanely good stuff from Alutemu. Engineered that endgame scenario really, really well. Obviously, that entire game was on a razor's edge. Of course it was. He was at 1 health and was, a top deck spell lackey or something generated away from lethal at the end of the game there anyway. So, of course, it comes down to very fine margins. So, obviously, the decisions he made ended up being super impactful. And there was a lot of choices there, particularly, we talked about the ones in the late game with the 2-turn lethal setup, with the Radiance pick. But his sequencing through the early game as well, there was a couple of points where, we were suggesting different plays of like, okay, he's behind, but how does he become the least behind he can in this scenario? And Alutemu chose to do a couple of different things than what we were talking about even through the early game as well, which, you'd have to argue engineered his way into that situation where with 1 singular health remaining, he was able to turn the corner.
Really impressive overall, and if Alutemu can get a quick 3-0 sweep, he'll be exceptionally happy to book his spot in the finals of Masters Tour Asia Pacific. He's going to be on his Rogue, and he's going to be playing a mirror match as Thijs locks in his Rogue once again. But as far as I'm looking at it, can't see Thijs' full mulligan yet, but Alutemu's opening hand, even pre-mulligan, is looking pretty nice.
Certainly not looking bad. Miscreant questing on the coin. Thijs just keeping the Dirty Tricks as an activator for a bit of card draw in the early game, something to do in the early game as well, which is sometimes lacking in this deck, and also a bit of resource generation, as we saw in the previous game. He ran out of stuff fairly rapidly and doesn't want to be running into that again anytime soon.
And I have a question for you here, Sol. With Spy Mistress in hand, was keeping Ambush for Alutemu ever a real consideration, do you think? As it does, sort of fill the curve, Ambush gets some good value against early potential Van Cleefs or Adventurers?
Well, I guess you could play out the curve that way, where you went Spy Mistress on 1, Secret on 2, and then Coin Miscreant Lackey on 3. Which is something some players do suggest to do because it dodges Seal of Fate on the other side. A lot of time, damn, I did it then. Seal Fate a lot of the time on the other side because you don't play a minion going into their turn 3. But it looks like with the mulligan that Alutemu's gone for, that he's going to choose to play a more traditional curve with dropping the Miscreant early, although he has now picked up a Secret back into the hand after mulliganing it away, so does have the options again.
Yeah, we have best of both worlds here, right? We saw his mulligan thought pattern, and now we get to see if that changes when the offer is given to him once more.
Right. The Secret on the other side does make life difficult as well, because if he commits to Coin Miscreant and it's Ambush, then he's going to lose a fair amount of tempo, although he can just trade off with his Spy Mistress if he wants to do so. But he kind of has to commit to one of the lines before he actually learns what the Secret is here, which is slightly frustrating.
Do you think he would ever backstab first and do it that way?
I think so. I think backstab is more valuable than this.
Okay. It's just, you get to know the secret before you commit to the full turn, right?
Yeah.
If you backstab.
Yeah. Oh, mama. That was a pretty spicy Dirty Tricks.
And funnily enough, easy for me to say now, but because he was playing Ambush, him not backstabbing could have potentially opened up the backstab with the trade with the cat to deal with the Ambusher, right? And still defend, have one of these minions stick around.
Very true. Thijs now is going through a very similar process as to what Alutemu had to do on the previous turn, though, because uses his Shadow Step, obviously really wanting to pop off with a big turn here. But with the news that it was not Dirty Tricks and is in fact Ambush, he now has to divert and go with the Seal Fate instead.
And again, it's the power of Spy Mistress, right? Because without Spy Mistress being there, I think it's safe to say Thijs would have looked at going for a Questing Adventurer because of that backstab potential on the Ambusher. But Spy Mistress is there, so it doesn't matter, because the Questing Adventurer would always die. So yeah, pretty crazy overall, but now there is backstab, there is Shadow Step as well, and there is a Van Cleef, and what there isn't is a secret to worry about for Alutemu.
Yep. He might choose to delay here, though, because you do technically get a lot more value out of your Shadow Step if you space this out one turn.
Is that worth it in the mirror?
That is indeed the question of whether Huge Edwin right now is worth essentially deleting a Shadow Step from your hand in this scenario as opposed to getting value on the Miscreant. This is what my brain told me, though. Get that Miscreant down and then try and set it up for the future, because if your Miscreant sticks, amazing, that's your Shadow Step target on the following turn. If it doesn't, you also have a good chance to get a better Lackey to Shadow Step in that situation to get some repeated value off that instead. So yeah, I'm okay with this.
So many options.
Thijs now, not with the best Reborn summon he got from the Pharaoh Cat, but honestly, the Spy Mistress does so much work, doesn't it? it's effectively done nothing but done everything this game for Alutemu, because the fact it's there just makes every play Thijs makes worse, and that's not particularly Thijs' fault. It's just the power of a stealth 3-1 saying, okay, this Van Cleef is kind of a 6-3, right? Like Alutemu only needs to conjure up 3 damage to be able to deal with this.
As it happens, this is now kind of the darkest timeline for Alutemu, because not only did his Miscreant die, but also a big minion appeared on the other side of the board, and he didn't really get any of the premium Shadow Step lackeys for tempo. Draconic Lackey is good value with Shadow Steps for value, of course, but what he was looking for is just a big blowout board state immediately this turn, and did not really get the option.
Of evil.
Nothing really
Decent
mind-blowing from Alutemu's Draconic Lackey. The decent reactive plays when he's fighting for board, but nothing too impressive. He is going very heavy on the Van Cleef, which I am a fan of, by the way.
Ooh.
Well, okay, there's more Lackeys. And this Van Cleef being literally twice as big as Thijs's, and most important... Oh, okay. I was just going to say, Thijs has no way to activate this stunner, which is a huge issue, but the Dirty Tricks is going to help.
That is filth off the top from Thijs. He's probably deserved one so far this series, though, based on some of the draws that we've seen from Alutemu up until this point. But now, if this game state does resolve down to the point where the board just trades itself off on both sides, potentially that extra value that Alutemu did pick up from the Dragons might just come into play here, because Thijs, yet again, slightly running dry in terms of options in hand.
Yeah, and even the fact that Alutemu just has Galakron means that he's never going to strictly lose the value game, right? Even if it's a poor activation like 1 on Galakron, the hero power alone means you just literally cannot run out of cards. Whereas Thijs, as you mentioned, just has minions, just has stuff. And
it might be time to bite the bullet and say that you're not going to get good value out of this Spy Mistress. Alutemu disagrees, though.
Alutemu also has the next couple of turns are quite powerful because he has rush options, right? He has the evasive worm next turn, but then he also has 2 rush lackeys to combo with whatever, even if it ends up being like Lackey, Edwin, Lackey, to make the Edwin rush as a removal tool at this point.
Faceless is a really good pickup there. Just maximum tempo here for Thijs. Alutemu is going to need something special to respond to this.
You can clear
Did have
the
a
big
cursory
threats up.
glance last turn, sorry, just playing double questing adventurer, just as opposed to going in with the lackey. Slightly more mana efficient, there's a good chance that one of them got to stick. It would have been weaker for sure against Alutemu's hand. I think on balance, this play from Thijs does look stronger.
So much.
Okay. I was actually looking at Rush Lackey onto the Spy Mistress to trade, then Rush Lackey to kill the Van Cleef, and then play your own Van Cleef.
Sure, I can see that.
Only because the worm does a great job, of course, but does just get pretty heavily farmed by this board. So would the Van Cleef, but it would just require a little bit more.
Okay, slightly better option off the Pharaoh Cat this time around.
I will say, though, in this position, only slightly, right? Because Thijs needs some kind of big value minions as opposed to just a good 2-drop. You know what I mean? It's definitely better than a mummy, but...
You could argue that, just an aggressive minion that fit the curve that turn actually kind of fits in with the game plan. I don't think he's ever going to catch up on value, right? So I think just pushing the initiative and being aggressive might actually be exactly what he's interested in right now, in which case Mummy is pretty much one of the best things he could have got.
That is fair, actually, because I do now and again find myself underestimating just the damage that stacks up from all these little minions rogue plays, right? You're feeling safe because they're all small, and then you blink and you're on like 12 health. No, what happened? I didn't kill any of these.
Looks like this turn we might end up seeing the double Rash Lucky instead. Backstab probably not going to get used here. You've always got a way up. You know, he gets to kill a 3-1 with it versus giving your opponent 2 cards based on the secret that you know is in play right now. I think starving the hand is probably the best possible win condition for Alutemu, and that is going to make that so much more difficult than it was a single turn ago. There you see, slight cock of the head up in the top there. That was the draw for Thijs. That might just be sealing this one.
Yeah, it was exactly what he needed outside of the actual generation cards themselves, or of Galakrond or Torquaggle.
Yep.
Does mean he gets to continue playing the game and maybe doesn't have to be as all-in on damage now.
Job's done.
Tough turn here for Alutemu. I think he might have to just go for Galakrond to try and keep up.
I wonder.
If he does Galakrond, worst case scenario, he has the Twin Tyrant and Goblin Lackey next turn to deal with some of the board.
But he needs ways to be impactful here again without necessarily using spells, which means, you know, high-cost minions being discounted might have been his best way out of that. Potentially just hitting Kronk straight up might have been his best way out of that. But no such joy.
Dark in the skies, my nightmare reigns.
Ooh. Okay.
Yep, although not needed right now, a 1-mana flick is quite the thing. As Thijs starts to push some damage edging towards lethal setups, Alutemu really does have to do something pretty incredible, and it's probably going to have to be, what, exactly Kronks now?
Yeah, even then, it's still kind of awkward. That is a good draw, activating those blackjack stunners that have been dead for a while, but is it good enough? As soon as you play it, you know, you're giving your opponent 2 more cards that you've been trying to avoid doing for most of the game, but you just don't have that luxury anymore.
Yeah, and I think post Galakrond, that plan goes a little bit out the window as well.
Yeah.
You fell right into my
So, of course, you summon the ambush. You can't really justify blackjack stunnering the biggest minion because it's Kronks, so you have to find a more honest way of dealing with that.
He does have Rush Lackey though, which with the Van Cleef.
Yep. So I guess the ambush token is getting blackjacked.
Don't let the door hit you.
Seems reasonable. I was for a split second looking at Bone Wraith, but the problem of that being replayed is actually pretty frustrating just because of how much it sticks around.
Yeah.
So, not the most fun turn in the world for Alutemu, but probably just the best turn he could have made in this position.
Right.
Give me a quest.
Thijs now gets the news what secret he's dealing with. Zedwin Van Cleef, of course, not a problem at all for Thijs. If he doesn't find a more elegant solution, he can just quite happily jam that flick into it.
Right. And honestly, at this point, all Thijs really does is have to just not let Alutemu grab a win out of nowhere, right? He just needs to clear this board, stay on top of it. This quest adventure is going to be quite difficult to deal with for Alutemu, maybe impossible at this point. So I like this overall, and I think we are just going to see the simple 1-mana go away Mr. Van Cleef. And this looks like it might be a setup for Thijs trying to make a comeback in this series.
Yeah, for sure. Alutemu is going to open several boxes this turn, I believe. No? Okay. Is there more outs this way to get rush lackey kind of interesting things by playing this first and using it as his combo activator than Pharaoh Cat? I'm not entirely sure of whether like Pharaoh Cat Miscreant into Card-2 Defender plus lackeys does more. Unclear. Either way, he was on a hiding to nothing. If he did have any out, I'm sure they were incredibly slim in that scenario, no matter what he chose to use as his combo activator. But either way, that is Thijs back into the series, as you were saying, Raven.
Yeah, absolutely huge, and what a difference a Krunks makes, right? Because that was and we've seen this a lot with the Rogue, just issues of just the second you don't get quite either Krunks, Galakrond, or Togwaggle into that late game, you do just kind of run out of stuff most of the time, especially in the mirror. So it was good for Thijs to get that Krunks and start to get some value going there. But most importantly, like you said, he does start to fight back. He has Druid and Hunter left versus Rogue. I will say though, Alutemu I think should still be feeling fairly comfortable. We talked earlier about how good we think Rogue is versus Hunter, but how do you feel Rogue is versus Druid?
I think as time has gone on, I think Rogue has improved in that matchup in my eyes. It used to be the case that we just saw, Glowfly Swarm come down, it'd be a real blowout, but I think, the addition of Spy Mistress and, better early game sequencing, better use of secrets, even Hanar for disruption being dropped down in the early game means that quite often Rogue can get a fair few minions into play going into that Glowfly Swarm, be it on turn 3 or turn 4 even from the Druid side. Then at that point, it's only like a backstab and a Seal Fate or a Kobold Lackey from a Miscreant that you've already played or something like that, and you can pick apart an awful lot of the board state. And I feel like if Rogue can get past that first hurdle, they have absolutely everything they need to be able to push through a lot of the rest of the matchup, because unless it's Mount Seller into 4 or 5 additional minions, it's really hard for Druid to do things from that point that don't just get utterly decimated by Blackjack
I
stuff.
must protect the
Yeah,
wild.
absolutely huge here, and we are going to see this matchup. Thijs going to go for the Druid, as Alutemu, of course, locking in the Rogue, the only class he has left to take a win with and potentially book a spot in those finals a little bit later on. The opening hand for Thijs, he has the Overgrowth, so there's, I guess, step 1 achieved.
Yep, ramp certainly crucial. Alutemu holding on to the flick. Certainly something that is pretty standard in the matchup. It can be argued that perhaps it's a little bit slow to solve the problem that I was talking about when Druid gets ramping ahead of you anyway, but it's still one of the most effective removal cards that you have. And if you're going to hang on to it and then still hit the Spy Mistress, hell yeah, sign me up. This is always a dragon. Unlucky.
There is Overgrowth and then the Overflow to help build up a strong Mount Seller turn as well for Thijs. So the plan is almost already just there, right? He just has to get to the point where he can pull it off without Alutemu being so far ahead that the beasts will be almost meaningless if Alutemu's already, running the show on board. Is this just a hero power and just say goodbye to that Spy Mistress now? I think so.
Does look that way, yeah. Now makes Alutemu's turn a little bit awkward unless something gets drawn off the top. Seal Fate is the only current option, and there's not really particularly appealing targets for it. And that remains the case now. Looking like it might just be a dagger pass.
So do you think it's not worth a Seal of Fate, either your own face or the 1/1? Do you think that's too extreme?
I wonder.
So there's scenarios where maybe we could talk about it, but it's not like he needs a lackey for a combo activator next turn or anything like that based on his current hand. And for all he knows, your opponent is innovating Glowfly Swarm next turn, in which case you'd really like to be able to backstab Seal Fate a couple of tokens and keep pushing. So yeah, personally for me, I think I'd take it slow and just dagger up in the spot.
Okay.
He seems to be mousing over that card multiple times, though.
It definitely feels a little bit bad to pass. I wonder if there was ever even a thought of he is going to Seal Fate his own face. I wondered whether there was ever a thought of Shadow Step the Faceless Lackey just to get more minions on board. But I do think that is a pretty feeble use of the Shadow Step right now.
Yeah, I'd agree. when you have Flick in hand, when you have Tog in hand, and when you're about
Right.
to generate a Lackey as well. Does seem a little bit loose.
Ooh.
Oh, the questing off the top is insane.
Now he can just Shadow Step whichever Lackey he wants.
And now Alutemu gets massively rewarded for that Seal Fate play on the previous turn, having the Lackey already locked and loaded. And that is an upside of the play, I guess. It does play to the top of your deck a lot better.
It has to be a step on the Faceless, right? Yeah, I like this a lot.
Replay it in the same spot. The old Direwolf positioning. Yeah, that works too.
And this has also saved the coin, so Alutemu can coin Flick next turn, or Togwaggle, of course, depending on what the situation is from Thijs. So Alutemu's kind of landed himself in an almost good position, regardless of what Thijs does, right?
Yep. And there's no removal in hand right now for Thijs, which means if he mount sellers, he needs double rushes. If he overflows, he needs to draw double removal to be able to deal with the questing.
He's going to go for that overflow. And this just gives Alutemu pretty much a whole turn to do whatever he wants.
Nothing! Absolutely nothing! No crystal power, no bog beam. That is a whole free turn of questing adventurer for Alutemu. Oh, what a draw to go with it as well!
It could just be coin tog though, right? Probably
I
not get
think
baited
so.
by the big questing.
Yeah, I did sit and just say, well, what do I just Twilight Drake? Just don't worry about it. But the thing is, this not only makes this turn still strong, and you get more than one threat on the board, but also it just allows Alutemu to really break the game next turn with the one. So I think I just like this, even though I would have been tempted with the Twilight Drake.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a smart not getting baited into just getting a couple of extra points of damage on the questing adventurer, just diversifying your threats and getting yourself the most consistent game plan moving forward as well.
And there's still fantastic options, right? Alutemu has Flick in case he needs to, and if not, he has probably just an extremely powerful turn anyway, and maybe even game winning. So impressive whichever way you slice it. Breath of Dream's going to come out, draw him a card, not going to be too impactful, and Thijs just not hitting those bog beams, not hitting those not hitting those moonfires, crystal powers. None of it is there. It's all still in the deck. The Flick gets all
lethal.
the health of the world. That, I believe, the Sol has reminded me, means that Alutemu is going to book a spot in the finals, taking down Thijs 3-1, and I think a well-deserved victory there from some very solid play.
I was hoping I was going to get blessed with an Alutemu emoji sign-off, and yeah, we got it nonetheless. I was hoping there was some way to style on him there at the end to get the spell damage guy out of your death rattle and just do something funky with backstab for lethal instead, but Alutemu got the job done in the most efficient way possible nonetheless, and yeah, that was incredible. Like, we know, obviously, questing adventurers, Edwin Van Cleef's, historically any card in Hearthstone that has a giant target on it, this card is good if it lives one turn, then it will end the game kind of effect, is good against Druid because it does live one turn more than average against Druid. But that was kind of ridiculous to not have any removal in your opening in your hand to begin with, and to then overflow and still not hit the combinations you need. It was unlucky. It would have been various combinations of two cards to be able to do it, but still, just seeing absolutely zero removal whatsoever in that spot. Not only did it mean he couldn't kill the questing, it meant he couldn't have an effective mount seller turn to be able to try and clap back the next turn as well. So yeah, Thijs will be perhaps feeling a little bit hard done by from that, but a semi-final performance, absolutely nothing to be scoffed at from Thijs' side. If we've said it once, we've said it a million times, but we'll keep saying it until Thijs stops winning, which just isn't going to happen at this point. He's a phenomenal Hearthstone player.
Yeah. When we're maybe 100 years old and the Hearthstone server eventually just shuts down for Hearthstone 2 or something, then maybe we will see. But for now, we can check out the bracket and see how it's shaking up today, as we are nearing the end of the day and nearing the end of Masters Tour Asia Pacific. Alutemu taking a win there. I know Derek and Gio will be hyped for that one. And I am too, honestly. I genuinely feel like every single time I watch Alutemu, he gets better. Which is definitely a good trait to have, as he's only going up. But he's going to be sat in those finals waiting for the winner of Bunny Hopper and Letter. And Letter must be feeling it, because there's a lot of pressure on him. The further he gets, the more he can secure a good chance at becoming a Grandmaster in the future season.
Yeah, and he's kind of playing spoiler here a little bit, and he has to be kind of comfortable in that role. Obviously, he has his own legions of fans, and he has an entire country backing him at this point. But in terms of, just casual onlookers to Hearthstone Esports, he will be the name that they're not familiar with. So potentially both Alutemu and Bunny Hopper will have more fan support than he does. So he's now potentially playing spoiler of the final that a lot of people are expecting and looking forward to. And he has to get very comfortable with that role very quickly, because he has to look out for himself first and foremost, because this, more than perhaps any other pan out, is a huge spot for Letter to be in terms of GM qualification, because everyone else around him that's picking up similar amounts of money is already a Grandmaster, and therefore is unlikely to be relevant in those standings unless they get relegated in the coming season. So this is potentially a huge chunk of change for Letter to pick up in more than one regard.
Yeah, absolutely massive, and it is coming up very, very shortly. And you know what? If you want to be in the flip position and be the player with the tons of fans, playing against, the up-and-comer, you do this stuff that Letter's doing, you win, right? You get yourself in the finals, you win the tournament, and then very soon, he'll be the one we expect to see up there with maybe some new challenges facing him down. I'm very excited now to sit back and watch. So we're going to go to a quick break while we set up our second semi-final. Don't go anywhere.